One thing is clear, though, it's advantage Israel in the war, and that too by a long margin. But in the Ukraine war, things are not so clear. It's been a battle of attrition this year. Long and draining fights, plenty of casualties, but frankly, nothing to show for it. Neither side has made significant territorial gains. Ukraine's top general admitted this. He said the war had reached a stalemate, but his president does not think so. Zelensky says things are difficult, but not a stalemate. Listen in.
I believe that today, indeed, the situation is difficult. I don't think that this is a stalemate. It's a check on the part of the Russian army. But before that, we did a lot. We had done a lot. We were in a difficult situation.
Now that's a problem. It wasn't some random officer who said that the war was at a stalemate. It was Ukraine's commander-in-chief, their top general. So Zelensky has some explaining to do here. Is there a rift between the civilian and the military leadership? Does the military think the war is unwinnable? Or has fatigue set in? Either way, it's not a good look for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia is stepping things up. On Sunday night, they hit the port city of Odessa. Around 8 people were injured. The city's main museum was also damaged. Today, a village near Zaporizhia was targeted. Ukrainian soldiers had gathered for a medal ceremony there. That's when a Russian missile is said to have hit. At least 20 soldiers were killed. Moscow has also tested an intercontinental ballistic missile. It's called Bulava. The missile was fired from a nuclear submarine in the White Sea. Last week, Putin pulled out of a nuclear testing treaty. Days later, a ballistic missile is tested. So what is Putin's strategy here? In the last few weeks, Russia has launched more and more attacks, especially after the Israel-Hamas war. The world is focused on West Asia, so Russia is trying to fly below the radar to push Kyiv before winter sets in. It's a strategy Zelensky is onto.
That now, when, of course, Russia understands that now, when focus from Ukraine taking off, and when this focus to the Middle East, and when they try to divide the world in this crisis, Israel-Palestine crisis, and of course, Russia is very happy with this war. They don't count how many children were killed there.
He knows it, but he can't do anything about it. Zelensky's support in Washington is drying up. Joe Biden has asked the U.S. Congress for military aid, around $60 billion for Ukraine, around $14 billion for Israel. The Congress said, no deal. They approved funds only for Israel, not for Ukraine. And this is a big problem for Zelensky. Without American support, he cannot sustain this war. Just look at these numbers. Total U.S. aid to Ukraine is $75 billion. That's military plus humanitarian, $75 billion. At number 2 is Germany. Their total aid to Ukraine is $24 billion. At number 3 is the UK, $15 billion. At number 4 is Norway, around $9 billion. All of them pale in comparison to the United States, $75 billion. So US support is key for this war. And right now, that support is shaky. Polls show American support for Ukraine is eroding. Many of them want to shut the funding tap. And leading that movement is Donald Trump. His campaign is gathering momentum. New polls show him leading Biden in 5 swing states. So what does Zelensky do? He invites Donald Trump to Ukraine. He wants the former president to see the on-ground situation. Wonder how that will play out with Joe Biden. Either way, it's a key moment in this war. If the US walks away, other allies will have to step up. The question is, are they up to it? This weekend, EU President Ursula von der Leyen visited Kyiv again. She was on a review tour. Ukraine had applied to join the EU last year, but before that, there is a checklist, a list of things that Ukraine must get done, like cracking down on corruption or legal reforms. The EU president came to review the progress made, and she says she's happy with it.
I want to tell you how impressed we are by the reforms you've made in the midst of a war. You should never forget you are fighting an existential war. And at the same time, you're deeply reforming your country. You have reached many milestones, reforming your justice system, curbing the oligarchs' grip, tackling money laundering, and much more.
These things take a lot of time, sometimes years. But in Ukraine's case, things have been sped up. A report is due on Wednesday. It will detail the progress made by Ukraine. If European leaders are happy, things will move on to the next step, formal negotiations. But Kyiv says not so fast. Their deputy prime minister wants to complete all the reform. She says Ukraine does not need sympathy votes. It wants to earn its place in Brussels. And how long will that take? Around 2 years. The decision is now up to European leaders. They couldn't care less about EU expansion until last year, but now it's all they can talk about.